Hi everyone, once again, this is Dr. Zeus, also known in my citizen capacity as Citizen Zeus, getting at some of the most important current issues of the day and giving an incisive analysis that goes neither in the direction of fear or in the direction of ignorance. My site, Citizen Zeus, is meant to cut through a lot of the scientific and conventional obscuring of the issue and the blind reaction to it. One of the most important things that have just happened within the last week is an emergency authorization for parents to give their kids the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine. And I've gotten some questions and I've been curious myself as to whether this is a good idea. The first question that came to me before I even got into this was, it seems like it's a problem, a solution in search of a problem. From what I could remember in my research in COVID-19, children under the age of 18, and especially children under the age of 14, have almost no hospitalization or mortality at all. They have very few symptoms, if at all. So what is the actual problem? What is the emergency use here? And I even did research around how it stacked up against the flu, and it is much less deadly than the flu, both in terms of hospitalization and in terms of fatality, as we will see. Now, I don't consider myself an anti-vaxxer or a pro-vaxxer. I think both of them are heavily compromised. A lot of times the reaction of the anti-vaxxer movement doesn't take a look at the fact that vaccines properly administered and only when they're necessary can provide some degree of immune therapy, ability to educate your body. On the other hand, people who have been wearing masks outdoors and have taken vaccines for every single ache or pain or any potential threat are not doing anyone, least of all themselves and their children, any kind of service by simply just reflexively buying up propaganda from big pharma, from industries that are meant to sell their product. And that's exactly what this vaccine is. It's a product. It happens to be, if one looks at the trends, one of the most profitable products in the entire world within the last 10 years, and especially with the extra boost that's given by all the free research and the ability to patent that free research, private patenting of free research paid by you, the taxpayer. Not only is the research more or less free, and you just borrow that and then you patent aspects of that research, but also there's no liability. So we have some seriously compromised sides on both of these issues. I call myself a middle vaxxer. I look at the middle here. Only take vaccines when they're necessary. Only take those vaccines that truly can have some degree of benefit in terms of that outweighs the risk. But most importantly, and I'm going to discuss that right in this video, can vaccines have a medium to long-term liability, not just risk, but damaging effect on our innate immune system, our natural development of our immune system? Some of the preliminary evidence seems to suggest that yes, it does. And this is especially important for kids. Kids, especially under the age of 14, but I would even say under the age of 18, because their immune system is developing. If we keep occupying it and distracting it, especially with all kinds of untested, emergency certified vaccines that have new untested technologies around nanolipids and new delivery systems, synthetic messenger RNA, and inducing the body itself to manufacture proteins, foreign proteins, as a way to prime the body against potential infection by these same proteins, COVID-19 virus SARS-CoV-2 being the most prime among them. My general approach is that we should only, again, take those vaccines that are absolutely necessary and only indicated when there is a real danger presented. We should not take vaccines against things that do not, on the whole, present much of a danger. Now, there is always going to be a danger when you just step outside the door. We don't always pretend that there's going to be lightning on a clear day, but it could be. We don't drive our cars thinking we're going to get in an accident, especially a fatal accident, but that is far, far more likely than a child dying of COVID or being hospitalized around COVID. So what we do is we take the time to look at these things, and then by looking at them, take the time to engage. And when we engage, we will be able to find that middle path between fear and ignorance, and we will be able to find a meaningful, informative way to look at the vaccine with kids issue. Now, again, I'm not recommending, this is not medical advice. It is meant to provide an incisive, alternative opinion to all the very dramatic and stereotyped opposition. On one side, completely pro COVID-19 vaxes, and on the other side, completely against it. So I'm trying to enter another voice into this whole thing. And let me take myself down into the corner here, and I'll let you know what I'm talking about. This happened just on May 10th, just about a week ago. The coronavirus update, FDA authorizes the Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine for emergency use in adolescents 12 through 14. Okay, ostensibly, this is here because this vaccine may provide some ostensible protective benefit. So let's actually look at whether or not this is necessary to begin with. This is the CDC, okay? And again, it's a fairly recent one. This is updated of March 19th, not that long ago, a month and a half or so ago, or 2 months ago. And it had to do with transmission of SARS-CoV-2 in K through 12 schools. What they found out, and they've known this now for months, okay, is that there really isn't much in the way of an emergency here. It says here, although children can be infected with SARS-CoV-2 and can get sick from it and can spread the virus to others, less than 10% of COVID cases in the United States are among children and adolescents in the ages of 5 through 17. Compared with adults, children and adolescents who have COVID-19 are more commonly asymptomatic. We will find out exactly how uncommon that is, or how common that is, and how uncommon hospitalization and death is. They never develop symptoms or have mild non-specific symptoms. Similar to adults, children can spread it to others when they don't have symptoms or have mild non-specific symptoms. But the issue is how many do spread it, and we're going to find out that children have a very low rate of transmission already with no vaccine at all. So we're going to look into all of these things. It said nonetheless there are now a little bit over 300 through the last year and 2 months of children that have died, that's under the age of 18, that have died from COVID-related complications. But that is far less than even the 3 or 4 months of a typical flu season, which is usually on the order of about 400. So when we're looking at the difference between those two, we're finding we have such alarm over this particular COVID-19 syndrome, which is the disease itself, and SARS-CoV-2 is a virus you test positive that is associated with that disease. But here's the thing that I found really interesting from here. It said evidence from several studies suggests that children and adolescents may be less commonly infected. That is, they don't even get the disease, even when exposed to it, at nearly the rate that adults do. The proportion of persons infected among those exposed to SARS-CoV-2 is one measure of susceptibility to infection. The biological mechanisms underlying children's decreased susceptibility to COVID-19 are unclear, they say. Okay? They propose a bunch of them. I have said this in past videos. What is very clear to me is that children have a very strong innate immune system and general primary response that has several big benefits. There's these things called killer T cells. There is an ability to capture these viruses or capture these pathogens and keep them from escaping or mutating. And these are the advantages of the innate immune system. As you get older, this innate immune system tends to wane, and your acquired immunity develops. You become more specialized and less generalized as you go through life and as your body is being educated. Now, that can be helpful in certain ways. Your body remembers certain kinds of things, but unhelpful in other ways. The ways in which it can be helpful is it can oftentimes help you deal with a specific disease, okay? The way it's unhelpful is that that over time, having so much exposure to different kinds of diseases and vaccines can complicate and occupy your immune system. And that occupation can actually depress your overall immune system in the medium to long term. I will show some studies that show that to be the case. So it's not true that vaccines are only helpful. They do have a cost, and you will probably never see this in standard publications, and that cost is oftentimes overemphasized in the anti-vax movement. So it's important to get away from both of those and try to make a sane decision about your children and your own vaccine. So we're going to look at that, okay? But generally speaking, we want to use as little in the way of vaccines as possible in ways that would diminish our overall generalized innate immune response, okay? And that would affect our health and our body's ability to learn on its own to deal with something. But if it's especially pernicious pathogen, if you're going to a foreign country and you're not built to handle that, your natural genetics and biome are not built to handle that, then it becomes it makes more sense. And if you're older and you have underlying health conditions and any one disease could kill you, then it increasingly makes sense to have an immunization or a vaccine. But in this case, it makes almost no sense to be vaccinating children against this. There isn't an emergency to begin with. The rate of fatality and hospitalization is so low among children, and their ability to even get it and their ability to even transmit it is so remarkably lower than adults that the case cannot credibly be made to vaccinate children, especially adolescents and younger, because the statistics and the science just isn't there. Most of what you'll see is, oh, it's 100% efficacious for kids, and oh, they're not receiving much in the way of symptoms, but it's not actually helping much either. Children normally are about 100% okay with it without the vaccine. There are very few who have died, okay? So what are we talking about here, and why is this being brought forth? And that's part of what we're going to talk about too. So let me go ahead and go to the next one. Here is from 538. 538 is a statistics guy that works with statistics, and he says kids can't get the COVID-19 vaccine yet. Now we just showed that this was early May, so a week before they actually authorized it. And here are the relevant times. Young kids are extremely unlikely to suffer serious complications from COVID-19. It's weird. Nobody understands why, but you know what? I'm sold. It's been a tough year. Okay? And as we keep going down, I put this down, I circled this one too. For example, even after many school districts had been open for a while last fall, the case numbers were rising to a surge. Remember how big that surge was, especially in November and December, going into the sort of Christmas season and after? A study modeling the spread of COVID-19 in the US found that the children aged 9 and under were responsible for only about 5% of the transmissions happening at that time. This is actual evidence, actual scientific evidence that children, even children who have it, once they have it, they have very mild symptoms for the most part, and sometimes they don't have any symptoms at all. And even if they have it in environments with the basic precautions taken, it's true, with some physical distance and mask wearing and so forth, they are not transmitting it to others. So this is notable. This is very different than an adult. And that's also why when we evaluate whether we give vaccines to kids, it becomes important. So let's move on to the next bit of data here. How do vaccines compare COVID-19 deaths and hospitalizations compared to that of flu? Well, here's the interesting thing. Now, I tend to be politically progressive, and DeSantis and I are exactly on opposite ends of this. DeSantis is a Republican governor of Florida. But what DeSantis said here, and it is shown in this fact check, is that the COVID is a lower risk for school-aged children than flu. And that was found to be mostly true in a fact check. Okay? We may not agree politically, but I agree that we should look at the science. And sometimes that science is abused by politicians, and DeSantis is no exception. He made some missteps when it came to his state's handling of it. But this is actually true when it comes to kids. How true is it? Remarkably true. As we go down here, okay? For kids 14 and younger, look at this part here. The spokesman said Florida's COVID-19 mortality rate is less than 1/100%. All right? That is borne up by other data. I wouldn't say far below. It's a little teeny bit below the 1/100% for the flu for that age group. Okay? So it is lower. Now look at hospitalization. It also says the risk of complications for healthy children is higher for flu compared to COVID-19. That was according to the CDC, which is now recommending kids get this vaccine, but they also recommend flu vaccines for children, which I do not. And we'll see why on that, okay? The CDC estimates there are 480 deaths among U.S. children due to flu in the 2018-2019 season, okay? And as of mid-August, now it's about 300 total after about a year and 2 months cumulative in the United States with COVID. It's about 300 and a little over. Anywhere from 320 to 306 I counted up to about 340 in some cases, but well below the 480 deaths just for a flu in a typical flu season. It said more than 46 children were hospitalized for the flu in the 2018-2019 season. That's a rate of almost 40 children per 100,000. For COVID-19, it's only 6 children per 100,000 were hospitalized. So we're talking about 1/6 or 1/7 the rate of the flu in terms of hospitalization. And death is significantly low. We're talking a year and 2 months cumulative versus your typical flu season, which is 3 or 4 months. And we still have significantly fewer kids dying from COVID-19 than from your typical flu in the 2018-2019 season. So where is this big push? Why? Well, I suspect a lot of it has to do with the fact that demand is slowing up for this vaccine. And if your idea is to get shots in arms, no matter how, you're going to be pushing it into the younger and younger age groups, even if they don't need it. And this has always been the case with so-called experts and industry. You saw it with high fructose corn syrup, bringing that out in replacement of fats with this low-fat craze that actually ended up in the medium to long term blowing up into an obesity epidemic. You saw it with margarine when they said we must get away from the saturated fats of butter. And then we found that margarine had even worse elements in it, trans fats, hydrogenated oils, which caused cancer. The long and medium to long-term effects are rarely considered by conventional science, especially when it's compromised by short-term profit and by being a little too cozy with industry. This vaccine is no exception to that, and I'm going to show that to be the case here. What is the real deal with regard to the risk? I'm going to use the United States here, but we're going to also show global statistics on the data around kids, how much kids get COVID, and how much they get hospitalized from it, what percentage of the cases they are, and if and when any of them die. Okay, so if we go back up, the basic, I guess you would say, summary of this is pretty dramatic. Okay, cumulative number of COVID-19 cases out of almost 4 million cases here, child cases here. The children represented only 14% of all cases. So children just simply aren't getting infected in the same kind of way. So do we see a change? Okay. There's a kick up in number of cases, but number of cases, remember, is not a great indicator. Because if you don't get that sick or you don't have symptoms, the COVID-19 part, that COVID-19 is the syndrome caused by SARS-CoV-2 or associated with SARS-CoV-2 virus. Okay? If you're not really getting sick symptomatically, and you're not really passing it on, and you don't have to be hospitalized, and you're not dying from it, it really is difficult a stretch to even call it a disease in the same way we typically understand a disease. And it certainly isn't an indicator of an emergency. And that's really key here. This is emergency use authorization and should be treated as such. Emergency, you will use something that has not the same kind of rigor and not the same kind of testing that protocols we normally go through when vetting something like an immunization or a vaccine. So let's go ahead and continue to go down. In terms of amount of cases, you can see how few cases there are with kids. I think this is under the age of 18 as compared to adults. Okay? There's a very big difference between how their immune system handles it and an adult. And that there's a relationship that I think it was something like 93% of the fatalities of COVID-19 are above the age of 55. That will give you an idea how strong age is related with this. Okay, and again, cases per 100,000 children, only 5,000 or so out of 100,000 children. That's a 5% case identification in children. And I bet you there are a lot more who have gotten it, but again, don't present with symptoms. And again, this is very recent data. This is from AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics. They're pediatrics, sorry. They're the ones that actually bring these kids together. So as we look in this, we're going to see cases per 100,000 children, just about 5,000, okay? Not much, 5%, okay? The percentage of total cases, right, is only about 12%, as we see here, okay? Now, what are we going to look to in terms of hospitalization? We've got that here, okay, right? Overall in the United States, only 1.8%, right, of total hospitalizations is children here. Hospitalization rate for COVID, those who have COVID, less than 1%. That's just hospitalization. That's not fatality rate. That's just hospitalization, okay? And that's back in 1920. Sorry. As I go up here, hospitalization is even lower. It's 0.8% instead of 0.9%, okay? There's 778,000 hospitalizations, total hospitalizations of all ages, and only 15,000 of those were children. 2% of all COVID hospitalization in the United States it's through 5/6/21, which is just about a week and a half ago, okay, 2 weeks ago. Of all of those, children under the age of 18 have only 2% of hospitalizations. And their own rate with regard to getting COVID is less than 1%. Incredible. This is not an emergency. We're beginning to see the data here. And deaths is even more remarkable. Okay, mortality or death was, get this, 1/100th of 1%. Lower than that of the flu, as we've already seen, okay? And if you look at the state-specific data, some states, including California, when you look at something like New York City, which got that huge hit to begin with, and you take something like that out, let me go ahead and move this on over so we can actually see the, oops, here we go. Oops, there we go. Let me see if I can go ahead and move this over here. There we go. If we go ahead and we look at a place like California, okay, age range all the way up to the age of 18, okay, we have almost 9 million in the population here. We had about 500,000 cases. Only 13% of total cases were those children, okay? Of all cases, there were, let me see here. Oh, yeah, of all cases, cases of all age, 3 million, about 3.7 million, and the cases per 100,000 in California was just basically, again, about 5%. Now let's look at mortality here. Whoops. Hospitalization, okay, somehow we went down. Let's go at mortality here. Looking at mortality in a place like California, 0 through 17, only 21 total, okay, out of total deaths of all ages, 60,000. Look at the actual death percentage. It's 0%. It's less than 1/100th of 1%, far less than the flu. So again, a handful of deaths associated with COVID. A bus goes off a bridge and more children have died from that than from a year and 2 months cumulatively of COVID through this entire time. Again, the data is all the way through 5/6/21. and all the way from, let me see here. Oh yes, here it is. All the way from, basically, it's an entire year's worth of cumulative data from May 2020 to May of 2021. Okay, so now we're moving on, and here's what we're finding. Okay, again, this is AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics, and it said a smaller subset of states reported hospitalizations and mortality by age. At this time, it appears that severe illness due to COVID-19 is rare among children. However, there's an urgent need to collect more data. But the data we do have, all the way up through May of 2021, is very clear. Now, around the world, this is also true. This is from the Lancet, okay? We have here, I'm going to go ahead and expand this out a little bit here to uncover this. Look at this first paragraph. In the USA, UK, Italy, Germany, Spain, France, and South Korea, deaths from COVID-19 in children remained rare up to February 2021 at just 0.17, less than 1 per 100,000, okay? That's like 2 per million, okay? Comprising just less than 0.5% of the estimated total mortality from all causes for kids. 2 out of a million, let me repeat that again, and less than 0.5% of all causes of death for children. That's an insanely low amount. It's lower than flu. And again, why are we getting such a ramp up on this? I know that's exotic. I know that things that are strange to us can send us into a tailspin. But this isn't cause for an emergency or an alarm. We take the basic precautions, and I've always been in favor of the physical distancing, the mask. I've been in favor of the science, not wearing masks when you're outdoors, because we know that it's by a factor of 20 less risky to be outdoors. We need to begin to make sane decisions about how we treat risk, and especially need to understand the medium to long-term risks and dangers of simply poking untried, untested technology into our bodies. If there isn't a need to make an immunization, and it does not appear to be for children under the age of 18, and particular under the age of 14, then why would we do it? I would like that question to be asked and answered, okay? We do not need a solution to something that's not a problem to begin with. Just because it's exotic, just because there's a lot of hysteria around it, we have to be calm, we have to be reflective, we have to be scientific, and we have to be driven by the data and not simply by emotions in terms of this. And in this case, look at the data. In the USA, here we go, okay? COVID-19 deaths as percentage of all cause and deaths for children from 0 to 4 years of age, less, about 0.25%. For kids from ages of 5 to 14 years, and again, this is recent data, the most recent data, again, a little over 1%. Per 100,000 deaths, check that out, okay? Only less than 1 per 100,000. About 2 per million here, okay? Here's it's about 3, that would be about 3 per million, okay? That's insane, okay? That's insanely low. The same thing can be seen in other countries. UK, very similar. Italy, very similar, okay? Less than 1 per 100,000 in terms of death. Germany, very similar. Okay, even as low as 1/2, 5/100ths, okay? We're getting to such exceedingly low margins. We're talking in all of Germany, ages 10 through 19, only 4 children died, that age range, and only 9 died in the age range of 0 to 9. That's how few. Same in France, same in South Korea. In South Korea, it was even less. South Korea, they literally had not a single child die. Okay, and they are a fairly advanced, technologically advanced culture, had an early response to this, but literally 0. Now, why would you give immunizations to children in South Korea when not a single child has died from that? Is that an emergency? I think the answer to that is no. So we move on, And here's what is important to begin to understand. Why wouldn't you just do it anyway, Zeus? I mean, they may have a little bit of soreness there. It's a little added insurance or protection. Why not just do it? I mean, come on, especially if it's free and you're a concerned parent, what harm can there be? That is an important question, okay? Because that's kind of the common sense way to look at it, right? Okay, so here is the reason why. There is a possible, not just possible danger, but a danger around giving too many vaccines. It can occupy, it can possibly disrupt the development of the innate immune system in kids. It's one of the reasons why we don't use antibacterial soaps anymore, and we don't give out antibiotics for every little thing. Those things not only can increase the chances that bugs will mutate and become resistant to antibiotics, but we need to educate our biome. We need to get kids' hands in the dirt. We need them to be exposed to actual viruses and actual bacteria. And we need our own immune fitness to be coming forward. The more and more we tailor away from that, and the more and more we use artificial means to sort of spike the challenge created by non-fatal viruses, the more and more we weaken our immune system, the more and more we set ourselves up for a catastrophic inability to deal on the general and specific level to a novel coronavirus or a novel microbe. It is important. We can't simply just look to the outside to provide this. We have to develop our immune fitness from the inside. And if we don't, here's what the consequences can be. This is a study by the Marshfield Clinic. Okay, this is back in 2014, 2015, right here, end of 2015. They did a study in the Marshfield Clinic. I've referred to this before. Some colleagues there reported, this is at the end of 2015, that children who had been vaccinated annually over a number of years were more likely to contract the flu, this is flu vaccine now, than kids who were only vaccinated in the season for which they were studied. The vaccine was significantly more effective, I repeat that, significantly more effective if they had not been vaccinated in the previous 5 years, said Bologna, an epidemiologist. Okay, so why is that? My own theory, and I think it's supported somewhat by both logic and by data, is that by getting the body to continue to jump and to specialize, which is what shots do. And flu vaccines are a particularly bad example because a lot of times they're not very effective. It can be as little as 0% effective, 0 to 20% effective, and at best usually about 50 to 60% effective in matching the protein of the virus for the flu season that season with the actual vaccine itself. But when you continue to pupper your body with this, your body is remembering and being occupied by a whole bunch of different proteins coming at it. It's like a person who becomes overly busy or overly active or doing too many things with their time. All of a sudden they get a cold or they get sick because they're not sleeping, because they're not taking the time to prioritize, because they're not taking the time to step back and to relax and to take care of themselves. When you go ahead and continue to input more into your body without allowing time for rest, hydration, exercise, good health, the same thing can happen with your immune system. You can get confused, it can be distracted, it can become occupied in such a way that limits its overall effectiveness. And that is true across the board when it comes to health. I don't see why it would be any different when it comes to vaccines. There is no free lunch here. Okay. Now, what's interesting about this is the same Marshfield Clinic says it in this first paragraph. It said they reported that protection from the flu due to vaccination was greatest among people who had no history of flu vaccination in the prior 5 years. But look what happened right above that. Now, after that report came out, they got pressure from the industry to try to highlight literally the exact opposite conclusion. Look, when you go right above, it said influenza vaccines given in prior years may provide protection against the flu for more than 1 year. Wait a minute here. Didn't you just say that if you had taken flu vaccines in the previous 5 years, that it actually diminished your immune response and it diminished your ability to fight the flu in any one given season? Now you're saying it can actually help? The answer is no. Yes, perhaps, if something is close enough to that particular season. And they were doing some studies on this. And you don't take the vaccine that next time, but it's close enough to a previous vaccine you've taken, it may prepare you because it's trained your body. But the problem is if you have too many of these flu vaccines that have sent the body in too many directions, all of a sudden you have an issue and a problem. Okay? There's a trade-off here. We want to be able to find an optimal relationship between the immune therapy provided by vaccines only in emergency purposes and the natural and innate immune fitness that you yourself have to develop, which can be distracted, occupied, and diminished by having too many vaccines in your body. Finding that optimal relationship should be the science in the next decade or two. And that science should be developed well. It should not be influenced by the pharma and vaccine industry that is tens of billions of dollars, okay? And we know where that's going to go, the so-called science on that. And it should not be simply reflexively shut down by fear and anti-vax sentiment, pure anti-vax sentiment. Let's find the proper relationship right in the middle. Now, where will that balance be? Given the industry, given all the money here, it is probably going to be more on the side of taking fewer vaccines. We had 6, then we went to 13, and now they're recommending something on the order of 60 or 70. When I had my own son, we did not do all the vaccines. We did not, as a newborn, put hepatitis B, which he had no risk for at that point. We spread out the vaccines. We looked at the ingredients of the vaccines, and when we found that there were deleterious ingredients, we would go with the least harmful or offensive one of those. And we only did those we found absolutely necessary. Those that created discomfort, we did not do those. When we went to the Philippines with him when he was quite young, at 3 years, we looked and we were very selective because we knew that his system, his biome, his genetics probably didn't dispose him that easy to deal with that. So we made some judicious decisions about which ones to use in preparing him for possible risk there. That's understanding the optimal relationship between the two. And that's really what we need to look at, okay? Not anti-vax, not pro-vax, but looking at the optimal relationship between our natural immune fitness and general health and how that can be enhanced or detracted from by artificial, essentially created vaccines. Now, again, a lot of these vaccines are created out of the natural virus, okay? And some of them have been quite successful in beginning to eliminate a lot of these epidemics, and we should not simply shoo that away. At the same time, we have to recognize that something as simple as advances in nutrition could be responsible for the largest part of those advancements, and a lot of times we over-attribute that to vaccines. So that's important to look at too. So now let's go here and look at, this is a little bit of an aside because this is for older people. But I wanted you to older people went from 15 to 20%, right? Vaccination. And this is a peer-reviewed Journal of American Medical Association. So it is not some kind of anti-vax. But what is interesting here is with older people too, okay? This is flu vaccine. Vaccination coverage for this group increased. This is people over 65, between 15 and 20%, all the way up to 65%. However, the 3-year moving averages of unadjusted excess mortality rates among people 65 years or older, right, to track the effect of vaccination for flu, rose substantially. The death rate went up with increasing vaccinations. This is surprising because influenza vaccination is thought to be highly effective at reducing influenza-related mortality. Instead, it went up. Now, again, I don't want to get people afraid of vaccines, but at the same time, this should inform the kind of vaccines we need to be taking and the frequency with which we need to be taking. There is, and people should be very clear about it, there is usually not an acute danger to this. Usually when it comes to these COVID-19 vaccines, and usually it comes to flus, people get a sore arm. And they say, as long as I have a sore arm and it goes away, I'm okay. The problem is not about that. Now, sometimes it is. Sometimes you have an allergic response and people have died from the allergic response, anaphylactic shock and so forth. But largely, it is more about the cumulative effect in the medium to long term, diminishing one's natural immune fitness, range, and general approach, and some of the effects that has. One of the important effects is that this more natural, innate, initial and primary response tends to capture viruses better, not spread them and transmit them as much. So it's better at transmission, at lowering transmission, okay? And it usually lasts longer too. And so those are two very important aspects of this, of not overdoing it, okay? And by doing that, we create a situation where viruses are less likely to mutate. If they don't escape, they don't hang around your body as long, dealing with these secondary acquired immune defenses, okay, it's going to be better for the human population overall. It's going to be better for herd immunity. It's going to be better for transmission. It's going to be better for just a whole host of reasons. Again, that relationship is important. Immune should only be used in many ways as a not initial policy strategy, but as an assistive strategy, especially for the most vulnerable, say people that are older with underlying conditions that may be destroyed by that particular disease, you know, if they might be wiped out by it. So that specialized approach by that vaccine may help them. Now, when it has to do with kids with developing immune systems that are already doing okay, the danger becomes much higher and the possible liability much higher, because you could be interrupting the normal and natural development of that, as we have an overuse of antibiotics and antibacterial soaps, and preventing the development of that child's own diversified, stronger, natural, generalized immune fitness. That is a huge cost. You get rid of that, you could have autoimmune diseases, you could have a sickly child for the rest of their life. We cannot ignore that. That has to be center stage here. So let's go ahead and go one more here. So here we have, with all that I've just said, with all the data they put out, CD still saying children as young as 12 not just can get the vaccine or should consider getting the vaccine, but should get the vaccine. I simply out and out disagree with that, right? Okay. They had a March clinical trial where this alleged vaccine was, quote, 100% efficacious. But as we've already seen, children's own immune system without the vaccine is nearly 100% efficacious. So why would you put a vaccine into someone that's 100% efficacious when their own immune system that they already have is at least 99+% efficacious? Okay, again, stop trying to create a solution to a problem that does not exist, especially a solution that could diminish the medium to long-term immune development and effectiveness of that child. That to me is criminal. That to me is scientific malpractice. And I have a real problem, a moral problem, a scientific problem, and a problem as a parent with that. I do not want to see that happening with my son. And I don't want to see that happening with the other children out there, that they become fodder for industry profits. And then we have a real problem that is worldwide, especially countrywide in developed countries, because of the way in which over-vaccination crippled the natural and normal and healthy development of internal fitness for kids. We need to, again, be able to balance that, expose them to various viruses, microbes, get their hands in the soil, get them exposed. And at the same time, recognize that certain kinds of viruses, especially in certain environments we're not used to, could be deadly. And then to begin to balance those two. Moving on. Are vaccinations 100% effective? The answer is no. Okay. The Seychelles is the most vaccinated nation on earth, but COVID has surged there. Now, there's slightly different vaccines. One of them is a China vaccine that the World Health Organization approved. All right. Another one, I think, was AstraZeneca. But look at Seychelles here. They have more people vaccinated in the Seychelles and even Israel, United Kingdom, United Arab Emirates. It's one of the most vaccinated places in the world. And right now they're having a spike. How big is that spike? Look at this. Okay, going along. Boom, that's after they're vaccinated. Now, part of this is that there are variations and mutations coming out, but that only says why vaccinate in a certain way, okay? Vaccination can give you some cross immunity to a variation or mutation. But we can see from just this alone that it is no guarantee that it's going to prevent you from getting COVID-19, okay? So you could test positive for a new mutation or variation of the COVID-19 SARS-CoV-2 virus. And yes, you may have lower symptoms. But again, with kids, they already have those lower symptoms. If the whole point is, and it seems to be the point, to make sure that people go below that line of hospitalization and death with regard to this, and above the line whereby their own internal fitness starts to kick in and become part of the solution and the learning that their body must have with regard to a new or novel coronavirus, then we've reached the right equilibrium. If we trust only in the vaccines, we can get this. Because vaccines were never designed, especially this one, for people not to get it. It says it in CDC, it says it in the industry papers. It is only designed to limit symptoms. We do not know how much it does or does not prevent transmission. We know it doesn't prevent it altogether. We saw it right here. We see it right here. We know it doesn't prevent you getting it. The whole point is managing it. And if you have a system that already manages it, it may be that you do not need to take this, or that the danger of taking the vaccine or the long-term effects of it may outweigh risks and or dangers and or liabilities may outweigh the short-term benefit of being prepared for a specific form of a virus. Not only there in the Seychelles, but here in the United States, 8 people on the New York Yankees team, this is just a couple of days old, were vaccinated, the whole team fully vaccinated, and yet they also tested positive, okay? So it doesn't prevent you from getting it. Generally speaking, these vaccinations will keep you out, it appears from the data, out of the hospital or out from dying, or gives you a better chance with regard to that. But again, with kids, this is not an issue to begin with. The data shows that to be the case. So again, why make a vaccine for a problem that's not even there, a solution for a problem that's not there? So it's what's really interesting here is that the things that we did use that don't involve vaccines, social distancing or physical distancing and mask wearing, essentially wiped out the flu. You know, of course, part of this was, being indoors and thing. But how much did it wipe out the flu? By 99%, just 1,300 positive flu cases in the entire United States versus 130,000 in the frame time, in the same frame in the 2018 and 2019 season, okay? So we're seeing the benefit of something that doesn't require anyone to have vaccines necessarily. The benefit of things like masks, the benefit of things like understandings and washing hands and so forth. Look at the difference here. 2021 there, 1,300 versus over 100,000 in 2019, 2020. 99% reduction. So again, I'm more in favor of those kind of things. Now, my dad used to be against fluoride, and he was very much against fluoride in the water because you internalize fluoride, it can begin to harden the flexible membranes of your body, create problems with joints and so forth. But I thought the good compromise was fluoride toothpaste. Why? Because you can get non-fluoride toothpaste and fluoride toothpaste. You're not forced to drink it, right? I feel the same with masks. That doesn't force you to get a vaccine, and other practices like hand washing and social distancing and just basically being healthy and maintaining with good nutrition, with exercise, and the things we know work. And if you want to see that, by the way, please do watch my video called Finally, a Comprehensive Approach to COVID-19. I go through about 30 different things that have absolute health-based effectiveness, scientific effectiveness with COVID-19 taken together. They are a formidable program for building up your internal your internal immune fitness, but your health in general. And again, please, take the time to subscribe, hit the bell down below with this. And if you want to, also, I have a place for donating to PayPal, both on my citizenzeus.com website and also on this YouTube channel. So let's just go on from there. Okay, so here's where we are at. I wanted to go ahead and kind of give you an idea of what the actual virus itself, or what this mRNA virus itself does. And Larry Palevsky is a pediatrician. He has a very well-regarded background. He tends to be on the more anti-vax side of things because he sees the ways in which they're making too many claims for these things. I don't subscribe necessarily to his views whole hog, but I do, just like with Governor DeSantis, I do, when someone makes a point, demands if they're on pro-vax or anti-vax side of things, I will bring it into a middle vax understanding, okay? And this is the part that is important from this Children's Health Defense transcript. And you can see here, and I will put the references below. So people think that this is a vaccine, that is the Pfizer type of vaccine. They also think this is an injection that's going to give them protection against the SARS-CoV-2 virus. But actually, it's just giving you, I guess, a kind of a messenger or alert about the spike protein itself, okay? So this messenger RNA code that's making this synthetic spike protein specifically, and the answer is, for the SARS-CoV-2 virus, the answer is no, okay? And this is the important thing here, because this has to do with the costs, okay? Again, this is to answer the question to parents say, well, for me or for my kids, what's the harm? As long as they don't have an allergic reaction and they have a soreness, or maybe they're feeling a little sick for a couple of days, but it goes away, we have insurance and we can get out more often. And if we have vaccine cards, and I'll be able to slap that vaccine card and go where I want to go. But here's the problem. Certain kinds of vaccines, some of them have adjuvants which are problematic aspects within the vaccine itself that can be toxic. Others have to do with this spike protein, especially the artificial spike protein. What Larry Palevsky here identifies, and again, this needs to be tested more, but he's saying that this protein, again, that your body's being tricked into producing, okay? Because they're using nanolipid technology to kind of sneak it into your cells. And then your own body is producing some of this spike protein. Is whether or not the spike protein has similarity with your organs. Because if it does, and you train your body to attack that spike protein, and it's too similar to things in your body, you're going to have an autoimmune response where your body's attacking your own cells. That's called autoimmunity. You see that with Crohn's disease, and there's like 140 different autoimmune diseases. It's where your body has become so confused, your immune system has become so discoordinated and occupied, that it starts to actually go after and eat and destroy the things that are actually necessary and healthy for your body, including organs. If that's the case here, and it's very difficult to see this in the short term, and all these studies are short-term studies, but we know from other kinds of studies, okay, this is a possibility, then we need to be cautious. We need to be especially cautious with this insurance policy has a cost, okay? It may be insurance policy for a very narrow, specialized new virus or novel coronavirus, but it could be confusing or sending messages to your system that could lead to cytokine storms, inflammations, certain kinds of allergies, especially autoimmune responses. And we do not want that, and we have to consider that when we talk about these sorts of things. So the conversation, the so-called experts, pediatric infectious disease experts, I get really frustrated with this. Things like 100% efficacious in preventing symptomatic COVID-19, without mentioning that it doesn't prevent transmission, that there's no proof that it keeps you from getting it. And we already saw with those other things that fully vaccinated people can get the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and the fact that kids are already nearly 100% efficacious even without the vaccine. Why isn't that being talked about? It just shows you how much the experts the higher education and the research is dominated by industry here. How do I know whether it's safe? Again, they're only looking at the short-term effects of safety. They're not looking at the long-term effects. They do not have time to study it, but they should be using some of the long-term studies we've already just notated in this video to know that there are long-term effects. Even though the flu vaccine is a different kind of virus than the coronavirus in this SARS-CoV-2, I'm betting that very much the same thing that happened with the Marshfield Clinic and in that other study about older people, in which too many vaccines for too long and too frequently can actually increase mortality rather than decrease it over the long term. It may help you with that particular flu. If you're afraid that you're going to die from that particular flu, it'll give you a short-term benefit, but it may have a medium to longer term cost that diminishes your overall ability to live longer. That's what those studies show. So we need to study the relationship between those two. This guy here, this is Seth Lederman. It was interesting because he talked about in another video that I referenced in another one of my videos about having a live or attenuated form of this virus. And I didn't realize that he was actually a pharmaceutical, entrepreneur himself. So no, he was kind of touting his own product. But again, he did rightly say there are different forms of these vaccines. And the one he has, I guess, the entire virus there. And those tend to be, especially the live or attenuated, tend to be longer lasting immunity because they're more like the natural thing and they more appeal to the innate immune system's handling of it or evoke that than say maybe a specific spike protein. Nonetheless, I'll just move on. I don't need to really dwell upon that. Okay, similarities and differences between flu and COVID-19. We've already gone over that. I don't think there's any need to really put that into there. And we already talked about, did we already talk about DeSantis? Yes, we already talked about him. I think we did it right over here, didn't we? Yes, we did. Okay, so I got that one repeated. And that one is it. And that's pretty much it. Okay. That pretty much covers it. I'm going to go ahead and just put myself back in the center. Oh, this has gone on way longer than I thought, but that's okay. I think that it's important, given the degree of effect that could have on your child's medium and long-term development of their immune fitness and their overall health and the ability of their immune system to distinguish between their own cells and invading cells, to really begin to look at this and make a very, very much longer term, more studied decision about whether to give, especially younger kids, this vaccine. I don't see any evidence, and the ones that I presented show that to be the case, where the statistics or the science, what we know about kids, would suggest that they need this vaccine. I suspect that we have an overload of these vaccines and they're trying to get them into arms, trying to get them out the door, but we cannot be using our kids to simply just get things out the door. What we do know is this, that kids are less likely to get it. Their innate immune system is strong, even when exposed to it in the same way adults are. They're less likely to transmit it if they have it. We do know that now too. We also know that if they do get it, many of them will not experience any symptoms at all, or only mild symptoms, at the very most moderate symptoms. So much so that only about maybe 1% of all kids, less than 1%, who even get it, would even go to the hospital. And of those, a bare fraction, less than 1/100th of 1%, would, to the point where just 4 kids in Germany, or 13 I think was total in Germany, and only a handful in the US, and in California just a couple basically, have even died from this. Far less than the flu, far less than almost any other kind of mortality. I think I even saw one where lightning was getting in the realm, getting struck by lightning and dying from that. Certainly much more have been, died through car accidents. And even the opioid epidemic alone in this country has caused 500,000 deaths. And that was created by Big Pharma and the Sackler family in general. Why don't we go against that? Why don't we see all the ways in which these so-called medical miracles are intervening in our lives in a way that are causing actual death, injury, oftentimes unseen and medium to long term? We need to have that discussion. I am very much, given the data from my own look, and I'm not going to make any decision for any parent, I do not see the logic in giving an adolescent a shot or younger a shot. Just because it's available, there are those other things that research has already shown are important to consider. And again, the middle path for me is to balance that medium to long-term internal immune fitness, clarity, not to confuse it and so forth. And in this case, it's easy for me because there really isn't a problem to begin with. There's a lot of fear around it, but there's not a lot, the data and the science show that there's not a lot of need for concern around it. For kids anyway. I have said in all my other videos the opposite when it comes to older people with underlying conditions. That's where the specialist approach might actually work, because that's one in which this disease may overwhelm someone. We had a friend here, had it 6 weeks, and he came close to dying. He was very much on the more obese side. He had a lot of underlying conditions, and he was older. But with young kids, in particular adolescents and younger, and even anyone under 18, it just simply doesn't seem to be indicated by the scientific facts or the statistics. So again, I'm bringing this out, trying to come to you again with Citizen Zeus as a middle way, an elevated middle way. Please take the time to subscribe if you haven't already. Ring the bell if you want to be notified. And I also have some opportunities to donate to this kind of research. You can do that on my YouTube channel at Citizen Zeus. There's a PayPal button there, or you can also do it on my website, citizenzeus.com, where I have other articles on this, investigating, slicing through the divides and slicing into the facts and into a better way to look at a lot of this stuff. Again, thank you for taking the time to listen, and I look forward to sharing again in the near future. Thanks. Bye.